Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith. On the line, we have co-host Dave Anderson and guest Steve Denton. Let me just read this off about Steve Denton. Number 11 in singles, number 2 in doubles, U.S. Open champion, Davis Cupper, wins over Becker, McEnroe, and Smith. He did beat me that one time. Unfortunately, Becker, McEnroe, and Stan Smith, the real Smith, all Wimbledon champions. Fastest serve, I think, for like 17 years, 138. At tons of wins at Texas A&M. And I thought it would be fun to just start, Steve, with so many stories, but Dave, we'll ask Steve questions. Let's go back to the Shanghai Open. Why don't you share that story, start that story with our listeners?
Yeah, I had a lump in my throat probably the whole week watching that. You never know if your guys are eventually going to make it or not. Obviously, you keep the dream alive. Valentin Vachero had played for us for 4 years. Last year, he had a pretty good run. He won 3 challengers in Thailand, which was kind of a prelude to what happened in Shanghai. And then he won another one in India. And then he got hurt at Wimbledon because he didn't know how to run on the grass and slipped and fell. And so kind of ended his year pretty early or prematurely. And he goes back there, not sure he's going to get in the tournament. I think he's the 7th or 8th alternate to get into Shanghai. But he goes early because he's planning on going and playing some of those challengers that followed the tournament. And so anyway, he somehow, I think one of the young Italians who was the guy that pulled out the last second to let him get in. He plays Shanghai Masters, who's a good young player, as you both know. Nearly loses that match. It's 2 in the third, 3 tight sets. And then he plays Liam Draxel next in the qualies, and Liam is a feisty competitor. I think he was 2 points from beating him. He wins the tiebreaker to win the second set, and then wins 1 break in the third. And that kind of freed him up so that he could go in the draw. He'd only played in a couple of the 1000s because he gets a wild card every year in Monte Carlo. So he had played there and had won a set against a couple of pretty good players, but never really broken through. And then he beat Desir, Bublik, Macek, Greek Spore, a heck of a win against Rune. And then I'm thinking in my mind, okay, great, that's a great tournament. You got to the quarters. Now you're playing and you win this match, and now you are playing Djokovic in the semis. So I'm thinking, well, that's a good tournament. And he ends up beating Djokovic, and then obviously gets to play his first cousin, mothers or sisters, in the finals. And Arthur had a great event as well. He beat Mickelson and he beat Zverev for the second time. He beat him first round of Wimbledon this year. He beat Lehechka's top 20 player, and he'd never beaten the FAA before, and he beats him. And then obviously he gets to the semifinals and has a really tough physical match with Medvedev in the heat and toughs him out and wins 6-4 in the third. So for those guys to play each other in the finals, I think I saw the number was maybe 4.6 billion to 1 if they would play each other in the finals of that tournament. So crazy.
And tell us about their background at A&M. Were they there at the same time?
They were for a couple of years. Arthur came first. He was a little bit after Krajicek was there. His first year, he didn't get to play for us because he was a non-qualifier, so he couldn't even practice with us. But he stayed there and toughed it out, and then played for us for 4 years there. His last 2 years, he played with Val. And his last season, Patrick Gibson came to the team. And what a team player he was. He was top 5 in college tennis. And I was chasing Patrick around the country, thinking that he probably wasn't going to come to school. I finally talked Lendl and Courier and Sylvan Guichard to let me have him for a period of time. And I told Arthur, I said, Arthur, if Patrick comes to the team, he's won a future and and he's probably going to play number one. And his comment to me was, "Go get him." And so he was happy to play number two behind him, just the kind of team guy he was. And because of that, we had a pretty good run in the NCAA tournament that year. We ended up losing a tight 4-3 match to Wake Forest. At Wake Forest, the year they won the national championship.
Steve, could you back up and tell the listeners what do you mean by non-qualifier?
Sure. Well, in his situation, he's actually a really smart kid. Typically, they have something wrong with their transcript where the eligibility center says they can't play. They can get a scholarship, they can practice, but they can't play. In his case, they kind of threw the book at him, didn't let him practice or play for us that first year. And the reason was, in the French system, when you get your baccalaureate there are different levels of that baccalaureate. And you can decide to go and take an easy route in your high school, or you can take the most difficult route, which is typically someone that wants to be a doctor or a lawyer. And he took that very difficult route. And because of that, his grades were good for France, but they weren't good for the NCAA. So they don't, which I think is a fallacy, they don't weigh those results, meaning that a person that is trying to get their high school diploma in a doctor or a lawyer type degree, they don't give them any deference at all as someone that's trying to get let's say, an education degree that's much less difficult. And so because of that, he was a non-qualifier that first year. And so he came to the team. We gave him a scholarship, but he couldn't play or practice, which was even worse.
But he was he has a record now for the lowest ranked player to win an ATP 1000, correct?
Who's that? You're talking about Val?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about Rinderknech as the non-qualifier.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Vachero, he was a qualifier, and
Okay.
yes, I believe so. He was ranked a little over 200 going into that event, and now he's currently inside the top 30. Probably going to be seated at the Australian Open.
I was just doing a little homework, cousin versus cousin, but the family, for one boy, it's the mom, for one boy, it's the aunt. So one of the moms was a very accomplished player. I've seen the notes here, 208 in the world. And
yeah, that was Arthur Rinderknech's mother, Virginie. She was a good player, and his grandfather was actually played at the French Open as well. So I had gone over to see him in Paris, and I kind of walked on down toward the court where he was practicing with her, and I watched him for maybe less than 2 minutes. And I had gone to Australia, and I had seen a couple of other really good French players on that particular trip. And after watching him for 2 minutes, I said to her that, I would take him and help him try to go out and try to play the circuit.
Oh, it's a great story. Then there's two other cousins. One was close to the top 100, one was close to the top 200. Quite a tennis family.
I think they're referring to Benjamin Balleray, was about 200 in the world.
Yeah.
He worked with Hebert, and he is Valentin Vacherot's half brother, different fathers but same mother. And then the mothers of Vacherot and Rinderknech are sisters. So the boys are first cousins.
Yeah, then they got one cousin, a gal, Chloe. Amazing tennis family.
Sometimes the pedigree is important in terms of being athletic, and obviously it seems like the second or third, kind of like the Roddick family. I mean, that second or third child seems to benefit from the mistakes the parents make on the first, and obviously they get to see a lot at an early age, and I think they tend to end up benefiting from it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's current, but the two cousins, Arthur is 29, and it's Valentin who's 30 in the world.
Yeah, they're about. I think Arthur's in the 25, 26 range. He'll end the year this year as the number one French player in the world in the rankings, and Val's just right behind him. But the key for both of them is obviously they're now on the main circuit together, and also both obviously in the slam starting this next year.
With Arthur, he goes forward so much. Could you expound upon how it takes longer to develop an all-court game versus, kind of a one-dimensional grinder from the baseline?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I mean, I think the all court game definitely takes longer. Obviously, there are a lot of nuanced skills that they have to be able to handle. I think most junior players currently really don't understand 2 feet behind the service line to coming forward to be at the net, and because of that, sometimes when you're getting them, that's really their first venture into being an all court player. It just takes time to learn that skill of what to do in that area, how to come in, how to defend the court, how to time the split step, how to defend the space, where the shot goes, depending on what the height of the ball is. All those kind of factors, I think, make it just much longer for a player like that to be able to hold those skills. And obviously, a one-dimensional player that's behind the baseline really is just kind of focusing back there. And on occasion, they'll get a short ball or hit a forehand, but they typically knock it off, and so they really don't necessarily venture to the net. But even in guys like Nadal's case and others, they continue to work on their game, and I think Nadal ended up having pretty good volleys by the end of his career because he kept trying to add stuff to his game, and obviously Djokovic has done the same. And I think that's why they've become such great players because they can play the whole court.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was going to ask that similar question, Steve, about how I really like Arthur's game and watch him all the time when I can on TV, and I've seen him quite a couple of times live just recently at the U.S. Open. And I was talking to George about him. He told me he played him, and you can verify if this is true or not, George. I'm sorry, but he played and beat Arthur to move past you guys in the NCAA's one year. Is that correct, George Goldoff?
He did. He beat us at our place in the round of 16
to go to the quarters.
To go to the quarters. And Arthur was up a break in the third, and George ended up winning that match 6-4 in the third and knocked us out of the tournament. And I think because of that, it actually, in some respects, really he had gotten to the round of 16 or quarters a couple of times, and that really jarred Arthur and us as well, left a bad taste. And because of that, I think Arthur was much more open about me going after Patrick Gibson that next year, which we were doing. Because he told me, he said, Steve, I don't want to come back and just, have a okay season. I want a chance to win it. So I said, okay. And so then I chased Patrick around that fall, and finally about maybe mid-December, I had gone down to Eddie Hearn Orange Bowl, watched the tournament, and decided to slip over to Orlando. And he was there practicing with Tommy Paul, and Courier, Lendl, Guichard were all on the court. And I walked up to him and I said, give him to me for a while. I'll let him play some pro tournaments as well. I had helped him in some tournaments prior to that. He had asked me to help him at Kalamazoo one year. He had asked me to help him at Wimbledon that year. That he got to the semis and lost to Fakina Davidovich because he just didn't know how to really play on grass. And, he was having issues with his coaching at that time. And I had some limitations because of the rules back then. I couldn't come on the court with him, but I could watch from off the court, and obviously I could watch his matches, and we were able to talk about them. And so it was pretty funny. One year we're at Kalamazoo when I was there helping him, and he had called me to ask me if I would come. And so the first match he plays in the tournament, here, picture, and you've been there many times, picture all these college coaches there watching. Of course, this is even before he decides to come to school. He'd already told me he was not going to come. He was going to turn pro. So he says to me, because I had obviously helped Austin win Kalamazoo a little bit before, and even Jack Sock had reached out to me a year or two that he had won there. And so when Patrick called me, a player will typically look at their coach or who's with them, and kind of pump their fist a little bit. And I'm sitting up in the stands with all these other coaches, and he pumps his fist at me, and I really don't know what to do. And so finally, I decided to go and sit behind his dad. And so probably everybody thought he was pumping his fist at his dad, but he was pumping his fist at me. And so, and still, even after that tournament, he says, "Yeah, I'm gonna." He won the tournament, and that's when he beat J.J. Wolf in the final, and he went on and played at the U.S. Open that year. He still was planning on turning pro until until that December when I went down there and asked those guys to let me have him for a short time. And I think that he was realizing maybe that it'd be a good experience for him to play a little college tennis. So I wish he would have stayed a little longer. I felt like his body probably wasn't quite ready at that point, physicality of it all. And he had grown up basically a baseline player, probably staying a little bit too far back in the court because he played a lot on clay as a kid. I was trying to move him up in the court and try to get him to finish at the net more, even in the semester that he played for us. And, he began to do some of that, but physically he wasn't mature enough to be able to go out and handle the rigors of the tour. And unfortunately, he got hurt a couple times over the course of the last few years, and just now, really, in my opinion, kind of coming into his own because he is healthy, really good physically, and now he's playing the right way, and he'll admit that to you that he's playing a much more aggressive style of tennis, looking to come forward, moving up in the court and taking the ball early. And he's had a lot of success this last year. He's won 4 challengers this year and also going to get into the Australian Open. So we're going to have 3 guys in singles down there, plus obviously Austin and Jackson in the doubles, and Hadi Habib, who's about 170, will get in the quali of the singles.
With Patrick, stubbornness. I certainly spent a lot of time with Patrick. He worked with Matt Clore, but when you become, I think he was ranked 1 in every age group. So he was with the federation, with the USTA. And just, as a junior, he just didn't go forward. We have all sorts of film. We have him playing left-handed. We have him, demonstrating strokes right-handed, left-handed. And I quite often have him play left-handed because he was really, really competitive. The 1-up, 1-back doubles and staying back. But don't you think that the success of the Cousins in the Shanghai Open has sparked Patrick?
I think so. I mean, he, in my mind, he was maybe a little bit further along than those guys were in college. I mean, it was pretty close, but he would have probably thought that he was a little better player than both of them. And for them to break through, obviously, I think encouraged him. And they're going after it. They're being aggressive with their shots. They're coming forward. They're hitting big serves. They're standing up in the court a bit more. And I think also too, I think you mentioned Matt Clore. I think has probably had some influence over him. I think they had a conversation maybe at the U.S. Open where Matt, just showed him some stats about, what's the difference and, how he's playing and how he should be playing. And if you've gotten beaten up enough and you lose and you get disappointed, discouraged, that's a real prime opportunity for somebody to step in and give you a different path. And I think he's changed his racket, which has given him some more depth on his ball and a little more penetration through the court. And then also his style of stepping in the court and playing aggressively. And as you guys both know, the matches in these tournaments are such thin margins that whoever plays those few big points is usually the guy that's going to win the match. A few years ago, when Djokovic was dominating the circuit, I was talking to Lendl because Lendl was at that time still with Murray, and Djokovic was winning everything. And he said, Steve, Djokovic is only winning 52% of the points, and here he is winning almost every tournament. And just imagine with younger players or lesser players what those margins are like. And so if you can steal a couple of points, certainly the right points of the important moments, then that's the difference between winning and losing.
I like the term brain trust. So Matt Clore goes way back to working with Patrick when he was in the 12s, and his brother Chris Clore as well. But I think, a lot of times people will grow away from, again, just to get a group of people and, if you, too many cooks in the kitchen, the messages need to be constantly reinforced. I know when Patrick did turn pro, my son Connor really didn't have an interest in coaching, but Patrick, I was the first person he offered a job to was Connor to travel with him. Because Connor's sense of humor, keep it light, make it fun. But yeah, I tell a story about Connor with Ty Tucker at Ohio State as I show up and Ty's saying, I'm going to fire my second assistant. I'm going to fire my third assistant. And I'm going to hire Connor. Connor was in the lineup for Ohio State because there's a guy, Kevin Metka, who you would remember. And Connor
right.
said, Connor,
he was an attacking player.
Connor told him, just play him at 6. Play him at 6, tell him to get his nose over the net. And they were just going to use him in doubles. But, Ty's such a character. But it's like Johnny Mack in his book, Forward, Always Forward. I mean, why don't you talk about that? How few people all the way to the very top are going forward enough.
Yeah. I think that obviously the doubles is an important component of it. We're a little bit unique in that we practice, that transition game all the time. And I think that it's an important component for these young players and to get forward as much as possible. Obviously, it's become a little more difficult. The string, the balls, they've slowed down the balls significantly. We're using these Dunlop balls, and boy, it's tough to hit through the court with those balls. It's tough to get 3 points with them, but obviously it can be done. And you become a little bit of a unique player out there that you're not just the same style as everybody else. And I think that comes into play as well for young players is they play that way and and the players on the tour or in college are not used to seeing it. And so they struggle and they're all rhythm players and they don't get any rhythm when they play a person that's coming to the net all the time and putting pressure on. And those passing shots you can make at 2 and 3 all become pretty difficult to hit when it's 5 all and 6 all.
No, thanks. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, changing direction from kind of college and the pro rank, Steve, you've got such a history in Texas in many different capacities. The junior tennis scene and when you were climbing through the ranks and then as you've watched other players go through it in your years after, I have concerns about all of the things that we just discussed, but also the character of the players that are coming through our sport right now. And maybe I'm just turning into my dad, But what are your thoughts on that?
I think that, this win at all costs kind of mentality has unfortunately come to the forefront, and there's a lot of, I guess, lack of a better way of saying it, inordinate competition among people, and that has created some of that. They just want to win, and they think they're going to get ahead by doing that when actually they're doing the opposite. I always kind of felt if a guy tried to cheat me that I had him, that eventually I was going to win the match because he didn't feel like he could win it straight up. And yeah, it's happening some, and obviously players think they're going to benefit from it, but ultimately it's a real problem, I think. And one of the things that at least the resources that we have in many of the other schools is this, kind of taking it back away from the players and putting it in the hands of the electronic line calling, which we're putting in at A&M and others are as well. Hopefully that will resolve some of it. But in the junior stuff that you're talking about, these different tennis centers and clubs around, they don't really have the resources to have it. So it's unfortunate that we've gotten to that stage. It was such a sport before that anything that was pretty close, most players just played it. And obviously that's not happening any longer. But yeah, I think it's more of a deterioration of not just in tennis, but of our society in general.
Steve, back to doubles. When you were ranked 2 in the world, everybody, all the singles players were playing doubles. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you would go to the majors and play 3 events. You'd play the singles, the doubles, the mixed. Granted, the rackets have changed, and it used to be 3 of the 4 majors were on grass. But could you comment a little bit on, like, say, a Ben Shelton? Actually, I think his left-handed serve is almost a carbon copy of your right-handed serve. So, I mean, if you were, and I do know, his dad and Matt Clore and people in his corner, but like a Ben Shelton, is it really that much more on the body where a guy like that, should just play the singles and not play doubles? Or you want to just make some comments in general on doubles in your day and doubles today, and the top players are not playing doubles?
Yeah, well, I mean, all of us, many of us were serving and volleying in our day, even as singles players. And so obviously serving and volleying in the doubles was just an extension of that. That's not the case anymore. With regard to Ben, Ben was a football player, a quarterback on his football team. He looked like pretty durable athlete, pretty strong, that maybe he could play a little bit more doubles. That's obviously up to his team. But, there's so much more money in the singles now. And I think these kids or these coaches and are concerned about their bodies being fresh a pretty long season and how many more matches they end up playing, or they going to get injured or whatever. And I think it's just kind of, but it certainly is something that will make you a better player. I know McEnroe really didn't like to practice, so he played doubles just to get the extra practice in, and obviously he gets to work on his serve and his return, and his reflexes and his hands around the net, getting the second ball down on guys off of a return or someone that's coming in against him. All those skills, he was able to hold those skills, and he was able to play both. I was able to play both, but it's somewhere down the line after us, maybe 80s, early 90s or whatever, it seemed to be less vogue for guys to try to play both much, and the game began to revert back to behind the baseline a lot more.
Another thing with the doubles is you played most of your career with Kevin Curren. Is that right? And it seems like today that the pairings should change quite often.
Yeah, I mean, it's typical of young players. They change partners because it's always their partner's fault. I think that's a mistake. obviously, to think that way, that you got to be objective enough and find someone that fits well with you, that one you can travel with, you get along with, you can practice with, but also two that fits your game style. Somebody may be a good deuce court player, but their partner can't really play that side, so you need to find a person that can play the ad well, and also two, being able to cover each other's holes in your game, whether it be someone that has a pretty good serve that can protect the backhand volley or whatever it is that maybe not quite up to a really high level. So all those factors are there, I think, these pairings. But ultimately, I think teams kind of get, unfortunately, a bit stale, or they lose a few times and they start looking at each other as they're the culprit. And in reality, they're really probably pretty close. They just need to execute a little better in the big moments, and that's really is the reason that they should stay together and kind of keep working together. Because a team like obviously the Bryan brothers or the Woodies or others that had longevity, they obviously did really, really well and made a lot of money playing the sport.
Oh, thanks. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I had written down Kevin Curren too, and we've talked a little bit about the modifications he made on his forehand from his young days to the Pro Tour. Do you have any input on that, Steve, or any stories to tell about that?
Yeah. In college, when he came to Texas, he had a two-headed forehand, and it was lethal. Anything in the mid-court, the ball was gone. But he could really only slice his backhand as a result. And so obviously guys could attack him there a bit. So when after college, Warren Jake kind of worked with him to give him a one-handed forehand. It was still very good. Wasn't quite as good as the other, but he could begin to at least square up and hit flat with a little bit of topspin on his backhand. And that really seemed to help him a lot as an all-court player. Obviously, it helped him even in the transition game with the volleys and stuff, because with a two-handed forehand, and he was a cricket player growing up in South Africa. And so to kind of take that, it was a little bit of a risk on his part, obviously, to take your best shot and change it just because it would help make his all-court game and his backhand much better, which obviously was the reason that he got up to top 5 or 6 in the world because of it. Because in our day, the grass was pretty fast, and if he'd only chipped his backhand, he'd have been in some trouble. But because his backhand, he could get over it, and because his forehand was still good, it was a really big move for him to continue to develop his game.
Was the two-handed forehand, was that influenced by Fru McMillan, or?
I don't know. I don't think Fru was involved with him at that time. I'm not sure, but he came to college with it when he was 17, and he used it pretty much throughout all of his college days, and obviously won the NCAA tournament. And then as he got on the tour, he just kind of realized that there were some limitations there for him to be an all-court player, but more importantly, to be able to hit over his backhand. It was kind of similar with Yvonne Lindell. For a long time, Yvonne Lindell couldn't hit over his backhand. And he kept working on it. And he said one day, eventually, it just clicked. And that's when he became number one in the world. So, those two guys, in that regard, had similar paths. Yvonne did a couple things. Tony Roach lowered the toss on his serve, and then he learned to hit over his backhand. And those two things, coupled with a monster forehand, made him the number one player in the world.
How do you hear the name Fru McMillan? Actually, at one point, Fru McMillan was one in the world in doubles with Bob Hewitt, and Jimmy Connors was one in the world. They both had two-handed backhand volleys. I mean, Fru was two hands on both sides. Yeah, I told parents all the time, Kevin Curren, you could tell me whether this is true or not. NCAA finals, Wimbledon final. He played the NCAA final with a two-handed forehand, and they played the Wimbledon final with a one-handed forehand. On the flip side of that, Gene Mayer, he was playing for Dick Gould, and Dick Gould, clever guy, diplomat, ambassador to the game, said to Gene, you got to make a choice, and you got to hit at least one-handed on one of the two strokes. So he stayed with his two-handed forehand, and he chipped his backhand. But when he came out, a lot of people think it was because he went to the big racket. But he got to be like sixth in the world. But he came out of Stanford, and he went back and hit two hands on both sides.
Yeah, he did.
So sometimes
But
it can work the other way.
Sure. That two hands on both sides, he really benefited with that larger racket, got more out of it because, he had, I believe his right hand was on top. So I can't remember exactly, but I thought maybe his backhand, anyway, his backhand was definitely a liability. His two-hander wasn't as powerful and couldn't do as much with it. But because he had that Prince racket, he was able to get to neutral a lot more and a lot of points with that two-handed backhand. And you're right, then he stepped way up in the rankings and beat all the top players. He was one of those guys that was kind of a magician in his hand, and if he could dictate points, he was all world. But if you could move him and run him around and allow him to not dictate, then he was not as good a player, and only a few players in the world could keep him from standing in there and controlling the court by taking the ball early like he did with both those two-handed sides.
His father, Dr. Mayer, side note, he once was asked where he ranked himself in the world, and he said, I think I'm one of the top 5 tennis teachers in the world. And I said, what about Welby Van Horn? And he said, no one compares to Welby. That's a shout out for Welby. But I was at the Roosevelt at the National Teachers Conference, and George Vacherot, who was such a great man for the USPTA, he used to run Dr. Mayer's camps. He was talking about the system, Dr. Mayer, and Gene Mayer was on the court with him. And I raised my hand and I said, well, based on Dr. Mayer's system, why did the two brothers, Sandy and Gene, play so differently? And George Vacherot pretty much started walking backwards and laughing when I asked the question. And then he said, Gene, why didn't you answer that? And Gene said, well, I just entertained myself when I played. And I told a story about beating a great player in the 12s, Billy Martin, 6-0, 6-0, because he used to just hit angles and topspin lobs. He used to just go out and entertain himself. He was that good as a young kid. But speaking of shout-outs, why don't you give a shout-out for the late Warren Jakes? I know you spent a lot of time with him.
Yeah, he was a great guy. We first met Warren. He was living off of Lover's Lane in Dallas, Texas. And he had originally started working with Jay DeLuey, who ended up at SMU and went on to be a really good USTA national coach and had a great college career. And then Kevin and I were looking for a coach, so we asked him to come join us. And we didn't know that he had also worked a lot with Ann Smith as she grew up in the Dallas area as well. And so Kevin, Warren, and I, traveled for quite a long time. And then kind of toward the end of our time, we added Bill Scanlon into the mix as well, another Dallas player who was a top player who very talented that beat a lot of top players in the world. In fact, I think he beat most all the top players at least once, Borg, Connors, and McEnroe. Yeah, Warren was a great guy. He was from Sydney, Australia. He was from Harry Hopman's mold, and he was number 9 in Australia, and all the other 8 guys in front of him had won Wimbledon.
Wow.
So he had gotten to the round of 16 of, I think, the French and the U.S. Open, maybe even Wimbledon as well, but wasn't well known, but still was a great player in his own right and a really good guy. And everybody loved Warren. He was a fine gentleman. He after Kevin and I stopped working with him, he helped Robbie Koenig, our great announcer for tennis. Mm-hmm. And And also he went to England, and they made him the kind of the Davis Cup captain for England for a year, and he kind of was the one that found Tim Henman when Tim Henman was about 16 years old. And when eventually when the English found out or realized that Warren was an Australian, he didn't get to stay at his post for too long. They put in an English person instead.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. Steve, this question is more for probably some of the kids and parents in regard to college tennis and, and the recruiting process. And what trends do you see with people, in Texas, if you're not going to A&M or UT or Baylor or TCU, they feel like they failed. I mean, that's kind of the attitude that at least I tend to deal with. And, encouraging people to branch out and look at other options too, other D1s and D3s and just, so many options. What are your thoughts on all of that in helping parents and kids?
Well, I think it's very important wherever they decide to go that they get a chance to get a game and can play. And because then you get to continue to develop your skills. I think some players tend to want to go to the big, sexy universities, maybe that have the big football programs or whatever, and yet they're likely not going to get to play. They're going to sit on the bench, and I don't think that's a great college experience when you don't have a chance to play. So I would encourage players to and their parents to look and make sure that they're going to have a real shot at playing. And now with the transfer portal, you can go to a school and gain some experience and gain some results. And then, possibly some of these bigger schools will begin to look at you even more so as being a valuable part of their team. The other thing that I would say is that I think that if you're really wanting to make a college team, that one aspect or one way to do it is become an expert in doubles. We're all looking for good doubles players, and they're kind of few and far between. And if you are really good in that area of the game, then you have a spot. And the stat is that probably 80% of the dual matches that are played, the team that wins the doubles point wins the dual match. It's hard to win 4 singles matches against a really good team. It happens on occasion, but not on a regular basis. And so being able to win that doubles point is huge. And all these college coaches are looking for someone that does have a great skill level in the doubles, obviously can return and serve and volley. And I'm hopeful that they'll continue to play doubles in these junior tournaments. Sometimes I feel like that maybe they don't want to play because they end up at the end of the weekend, after they're done, they want to run back home or whatever instead of having to stay and play the late matches. And I get that, but I think it's a real important thing for these young players to have that opportunity to continue to play doubles and then give themselves a chance to make these teams, but also to branch out. There are a lot, like you said, Dave, there's a lot of good programs. There's a lot of good universities. And in order to have a great experience, they need to go somewhere where they can be in the lineup and, fight with their teammates. And, the exciting part of college tennis is being a part of those dual matches. And if you're able to be on a team where you're contributing, that's, I think, it's way better.
Guys, before we started recording for our listeners, talking about the Canadian gal she's playing a pro tournament down at Baylor, one of the PTTs, and she was at Brookhaven where Dave works. For days, she's going to go back at the end of the tournament. She, to me, is somebody who could help change the culture because she can already play doubles, and she's making changes with her grips off the ground, and I find that a lot of times college coaches, I feel sorry for them in one sense because they're recruiting kids who played 10 years of doubles the wrong way. But I think also, too, they're not really looking at, is a prospect a good doubles player? With that, in doubles, obviously Austin Krajicek, I've known him since he was 7 years old, and he's what an honor to be the number one player in the world. But talk to us a little about Jackson Withrow. I know you sent him to me for 1 week, but I know my son Connor won one or two of the smaller tournaments with him at one time. But I looked it up. He's top 20. He's made almost $2 million. Tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, he, grew up in Nebraska, a great athlete, could throw a baseball and a football like no other. Had a really good, I think, the key for many servers is just how good their second serve is. And I think Jackson had one of the best second serves that I can remember, and also had a great overhead as well. And, he played mostly number 6 for us at A&M, but he played number 1 doubles, and he and Arthur lost in the finals of the NCAA in Tulsa to Rinderknech and, I'm drawing a blank on his name, the young player at UCLA that won the singles and the doubles that year. He's been 50 or 60 in the world. Matt Floors worked with him.
Mackenzie McDonald?
Yeah, Mackenzie McDonald.
Yeah.
And they played us in the finals there when Mackie won both the singles and the doubles that year. But Jackson has kept working on his skills. He had some injuries. He had a wrist issue that made him, I know for a while, he played left-handed. And I went out and hit with him for about 6 months just because he couldn't play with his right hand. So he stayed in there and fought and, played doubles with a guy that played at SMU for a while, and they got up there, and heck, they were the alternate at the Masters last year. I think they were the 9th ranked team. Had a great year, and like you said, has made some money at this sport, and continues to be out there and is one of the top players in the world in doubles. He has had a little, like a lot of these kids, the doubles is pretty thin margins with 2 sets and a tiebreaker, no ad scoring, and you lose a few no ad points and you lose a third set tiebreaker or two. Kind of, it's not really indicative of the level that you're playing, but just not getting over the hump with the matches. And his rankings dropped a little bit, kind of like Austin's did, and they're trying to work their way back up, but they're still out there battling away, trying to get back to where they were a couple of years ago.
Steve, could you comment on the term lifer? I use that where some people have so much passion for the game, they're just not going to go away. I would use that term for an Austin Krajicek. Is Jackson Withrow the same? Kind of a lifer? He was, no matter what, he was going to make it as a pro player?
Yeah, I think so. I think he, he's had a stint or two as a kind of a third assistant already. All these guys, they come to a point where they think maybe they're going to hang it up, and then they give it one more big shot, and they typically end up relaxing and just doing really well when they do that. Yeah, I see those guys. I don't think that Austin will do something that's outside of tennis, whether it be coaching in college or helping guys on the tour. And I think Jackson's probably the same way. They love the sport, and probably more proud of anything else that we've done at A&M. When Bob McKinley was here, who was a great coach, and I know you guys know him well, unbelievable person as well. And then Kevin O'Shea as well. Those guys have helped make this ride that we've been on here at A&M for the last 20 years. They have made it fun, and they have kept the fire lit for lots of players that they're still out playing. I think we certainly have more guys than any other school out there playing, and certainly at the majors. And these guys are a big part of that because these guys kept trying to get better and improving their game, and they didn't get discouraged or jaded because they lost a little bit. They kept going, and we've got quite a few guys like that that are still as passionate about it today as they were when they even came to school, which I think I'm probably more proud of that than anything else.
Oh, that's great. Another shout out. What about the women's coach at Auburn, Jordan? One of our players was just
Jordan Sabo. Yeah,
yeah.
he's another lifer. He came to us, played doubles with Jeremy Efferding, and was on a couple of our SEC championship teams. A relentless recruiter, loves to give lessons to the girls. He was and I think Mark Weaver will tell you that he was a major reason why they were able to win a couple of years ago and have had such good teams. And obviously he wanted to branch out and be his own guy. And, he right away has cemented himself as one of the better young coaches in the sport. And Auburn's doing very well as a result. And I think it's just because he has a lot of passion and he loves it and he recruits really hard and he trains the girls really hard. And I think he got a lot of that from being around Bob and Kevin and I when he was here playing for us.
And he's an Aussie, right?
He's an Aussie, that's right. He's from Melbourne.
Yeah, one of our students, Maggie Sones, was fortunate to take a campus visit, and maybe she would go there. How about other coaches from your tree, all your years now, tennis?
Yeah, Niall Angus is at Santa Clara. Harrison Adams is at Stanford. So yeah, we've got a few guys out at different places. I'm probably forgetting one or two. Jordy Arcanata played for us on Arthur and Patrick's 2018 team that lost in the semis. He hardly lost a match, and he's been with Francis Tiafoe for a long time, so just recently. And he loved tennis as well and was really making a major impact on Francis throughout the years that they traveled together. They grew up in College Park and were lifelong friends, and Francis brought Jordy with him when he went on the circuit.
You mentioned Bobby McKinley. I was recently in San Antonio, and I had never been on the Trinity campus. You're probably a little bit too young to have played against in college Brian Gottfried and Bobby McKinley. But tell us Dick Stockton. What comes? You obviously played when you played at UT and won 150 matches, singles and doubles, 150 plus. What was paint a picture for the listeners? What was Trinity like with Clarence Mabry and back when they were a D1 powerhouse on the men's side?
Yeah, they were great way back when. I grew up in Corpus Christi, and 3 of the top 5 teams in the country were UCC, University of Corpus Christi, Rice, and Trinity. And Trinity had, even in the old days, even better players. But my memories are more of Bobby McKinley and Brian Gottfried, who got to the finals of the French Open, and Dick Stockton, who's a top 5 player, and Paul Gherkin, who was a great player and ran the club there in New York for a long time, there at Forest Hills. And then Pancho Wathall was on that team as well. And Pancho was at Southern Hills in Tulsa for a long, long time as the pro there. And then Howard Butt III was on that team as well. And he was a great junior player in Texas growing up in Corpus Christi. And he's a little older than I am. I guess probably Bob's age. They all went to school together. And I didn't know this, but Andy Brandy was on that team as well.
Yeah, I knew that. I worked for Andy Brandy.
Yeah.
Left us too soon, Andy Brandy.
Yep. Yep. He was a great coach and a great mind especially I thought he did a fantastic. Not only did he win national championships on the women's side, but he was a really good developmental coach for young players with the USTA. They had some good young players because he cared a lot, spent a lot of time with them.
What about, appreciate those comments on Andy. What about Clarence Mabry? What comes to your mind with Clarence Mabry?
Clarence Mabry is T-bar M for me, and the T stood for Turpin, which was Jack Turpin, and his boys, Mark and Jeff, played at SMU, and Scott played at Rice, and the bar was Tut Barton, and we all remember him as a great coach and player at TCU. I think he was the number one player in the country for a while. And then the M stood for Mabry. And so they put all that together. And at least back when I was a kid, there was a T-bar M in the New Braunfels area. There was one in Corpus. There was obviously the main one in Dallas. And they were pillars of the game at that time.
Go ahead, Dave. It's amazing history.
Yeah, no. Was Bill McGowan on that team down there when on that group of guys that you were mentioning? Did he?
I think so, but he may have. Yeah. I don't know if he was there at that time. He may have been a year or two later, possibly.
Yeah.
But
I'll tell you Bill McGowan. I'll tell you Bill McGowan's story. I don't want to interrupt it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was at T-bar M in Dallas with a group of people. You may have been with me, Dave, and we were helping Bill Jacobson with CompuTennis, and parents were learning how to chart. I remember that particular time, Peter Fleming, they would have one pro come in and speak. And so it rained and there was some delays. I mean, there were indoor courts, but I remember asking Bill McGowan. So I must have been there with like 10 students from Tennis Tech. It was a big treat for us to go into Dallas and be part of big time tennis. And so I said to McGowan, tell us the story. And that's, adversity quotient from our language. That's where that comes from. Is McGowan told the story of Stockton and Godfrey being roommates. And what I have in front of me is a yellow pad of paper. And they taped one to their door. They played a set a day, but they practiced 4 times. They did serve and return. They went to team practice. They found another time to practice, just going cross courts and down the lines. But they played a set a day. And Bill McGowan just said, he started by, let me tell you a story of adversity quotient. How much can you take? And then they ended up in the NCAA finals, and they both ended up being top 10 in the world. But I always, Clarence Mabry, he ran the National Teachers Conference for the longest time. He just seemed like, he was really a people person, a player's coach. I thought he had the ability to make people laugh. Of course, I only knew him as a clinician. I didn't know him as a coach. But I was always intrigued by what happened at Trinity.
Well, I was just gonna, I've known Mark Weaver since he was out playing doubles with Chad Clark, trying to make his way out there. And you mentioned we spoke about Kevin Curren, and whenever I see Mark Weaver serve, I think Kevin Curren. Does Mark still have a serve, or does it ring any memories back to Curren serve?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe a little. There's some similarities. I haven't really observed him serving a lot in recent time, but meaning more that he had a lower toss and.
Yeah, he'd really, coil his upper body. His toss was really low and out in front and out in the right a little, and they had a lot of similarities. But I don't know if Mark is serving like he was back in his 20s, but
probably not. Probably like most of us, but I know he has a really sweet two-handed backhand. I remember seeing that, and even in recent years, you can see. But they've had a great program here for a while, and they're staying consistently in the top 5, which is great to see, and obviously A&M is reaping the benefits of that.
He goes way back where he was Bobby Kleinicke's assistant, correct?
He was, yeah. He's from Louisiana originally.
I just remember, of course, I've been on the A&M campus in different capacities, here, then, and, a lot of different times. But why don't you comment on his coaching style? I was just always thought he was really so quiet when he was an assistant.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I don't.
Not that that's wrong, but he's done so well. He's done so well, and I think a lot of times the person who's very gregarious and promoting themselves, they climb the ladder quite quickly. So it's great to see where the quiet guy is on top.
Well, I think also, I mean, if you're a head coach, you kind of end up, and certainly in today's time, you end up being a bit of a CEO a little bit. And if you know what your weaknesses are, you got to go out and find people that are going to complement you and cover up those weaknesses. And I think probably Mark did a great job of that. Obviously, hiring Jordan, and Jordan was much more outgoing and gregarious, like you said. And so I think that's a good quality to be able to recognize what you lack and try to fill that void with someone that can make you a really strong team.
Oh, no, thanks. Here's some tennis history. I would guess that when you came out of college and went on the tour, that Cliff Ritchie, the story of San Angelo, Texas, I do think that perhaps there was going to be an argument. Murat Safin and his sister, who were both ranked one in the world, but it's a little town, San Angelo, Texas, and George, the father, George Ritchie, if I believe I have the first name correct, he was a contemporary of Vic Braden's. It seemed like back in the day, Jimmy Everett was a contemporary of Braden, and they all knew each other from tournaments. I think Vic, through science, through film, obviously took tennis up a level. But do you know, were you connected? Did you ever play Cliff Ritchie?
No, we never did, but we used to go out and play the Highway 80 circuit in San Angelo, and we played there at the little club.
Yeah.
And their house was right next to that club, and he and his sister Nancy would be out practicing there. So, but I never played with him. He had already retired once I got out on the circuit.
Yeah, he was so feisty. He's a small guy. Nancy was such a super player as well. But I think that any junior would benefit from watching films of Cliff Ritchie. What a fighter he was.
Yeah, he was.
Well, I think it's fascinating. I just, I was aware of the history of it, but, to always hear. I tell this to kids all the time. I had a player lined up to go to Trinity, and they didn't want to go. And who were we talked about the Trinity teams. Who was on the Rice team? That some Texas names. Was that when Mike Estep and players like him?
Yeah, Mike Estep and Emilio Montano.
Harold Solomon, he wasn't Texan, but
George
Harold Solomon.
Harold Solomon. There was one other really good player. Zan Gary was from there as well, from Lookout Mountain, Tennessee. He played there. And so they had a really, really good team, those 4 or 5 guys. Because in those days, still, the NCAA tournament was just a regular tournament, and every team got 4 players. And however you did in the tournament determined who was going to be the team champion. Mm-hmm. And so I think that last year that happened was at Notre Dame when Jimmy Connors, I know Jimmy beat at UCLA, Jimmy beat Bob McKinley in the quarters. And I think that sealed their win the NCAA tournament. And it was interesting because Jimmy Connors grew up in St. Louis with Bob McKinley, and Bob McKinley had beaten Jimmy 17 times in a row until that college match. And so,
unbelievable.
Yeah. It's a pretty funny story. So Jimmy would always come. Jimmy's pretty brash, and he would come to the USTA convention or whatever there in New York, the Open, and he'd come in and he'd say, I'll walk in with all these teaching pros in there. Says, I'll challenge every one of you in here, except for that guy right there. And he'd point to Bob McKinley. Bob had beaten him so many times as a kid. And toward the end of their junior career, Gloria Connors was known as quite a piece of work. And so Bob was losing to Jimmy for the first time. So Bob began to drop shot and lob him. And he ended up coming back and beating him in 3 sets. And Gloria was just human. She got up in Bob's face and pointed her finger at him. You will never beat Jimbo like that again. We will go out and we will hit so many overheads that you will never beat him like that. And that's where Jimmy learned that sky hook.
Exactly, the sky hook.
Oh, wow.
Because of that, if you recall, kind of had that, not really it was kind of a half overhead, but he learned that in those days because of Bob. And so anyway,
actually, the McKinleys. I'm trying to think of it. I should have this at the tip of my tongue. Bill. Back before sports exploded, gentleman in St. Louis, just kicking myself for not.
You talking about the guy that taught them tennis in St. Louis, and he taught them how to play ping pong first?
Yeah, he would go to the park, and generally was a shortstop. He picked out the McKinley boys, and he met with the parents and said, if you buy a ping pong table, and they play with the Eastern grip on the forehand side, Eastern grip on the backhand side, but they come and they watch me teach every weekend for a year. I'll coach your kid for free. And there was it wasn't just the McKinleys, the Buck Holtz and his brother.
Buck Holtz, right.
Dave Fish from Harvard always talks about that story about how many people came out of St. Louis.
Yeah, I wish I could remember his last name.
Yeah, when we hang up, I'll be able to come up with it. But yeah, that was a different time in sports. How about Chuck McKinley? What comes to your mind? I never really saw him play live, and I know a lot of people did. Small guy who could jump through the gym. You must have spent some time around him as a young Texan.
He supposedly could dunk a basketball at his height. He had tremendous athletic ability, and he obviously won Wimbledon there, either 59 or 60. I can't remember the exact year, but
I thought it was 63. But anyway, Clarence maybe he just asked Clarence, "Can I go play Wimbledon instead of playing the NCAAs?" And easygoing Clarence said, "Yeah." He only played it one time and he won it. That's my recollection. But yeah, for our listeners, he died at a very young age of leukemia. Correct?
Yeah, he had some sort of brain issue, some sort of tumor or something, an inoperable position. But yeah, he died in his 40s, I believe.
Well, for yourself, I mean, you're an elder statesman like myself. You've been at A&M for a long time. Are you going to keep going?
Well, it's really interesting. This was year 20 this year. Trev Alberts, who's our new athletic director, has asked me to sign a new contract, which I just did, and I'll be here through 2030 at least. And so we'll see how that goes, but I'm looking forward to it and still love working with the guys and helping them. And, as long as I feel like I'm making some progress with them and being a benefit and not a hindrance to them, I'll probably keep doing it, because it's like you said, you kind of end up being a lifer at something, and it's really what I'm best at. And so I've enjoyed being here. I 20 years ago, if you'd have told me, well, I'll just say this: when I was 35 years old, if you would have told me that I was going to be as a Longhorn, that I was going to be the head tennis coach at Texas A&M, I'd have laughed at you. So, but I guess God has a sense of humor. Put me over here, and I've enjoyed every minute of it, because I've always been a Texas guy, and if I couldn't be at Texas, this was the best place to be. And I often tell my people I was a Longhorn for 50 years, and I've been an Aggie now for almost 20, and I got over here just as quickly as I could.
Give a shout out for the Irishman, Kevin O'Shea. He's been with you a long time, correct?
He started with me 20 years ago. Yep. He and Bob McKinley, we started together, and Kevin's been with me all 20 years. And Kevin's got 6 kids, and one of them played at Abilene Christian, and another one at Hardin Simmons, and he's still got 3 or 4 more, behind, and they all love playing tennis, and he loves the sport and has done an amazing job with our kids over all this time. They have really benefited from not only his knowledge of the game, but just his passion for it and treating the kids like they're part of his family. And he's been a real a real asset all this time that we've been together.
I would guess his off-court skills too, because I know he came over from the Texas Tennis Association, and so he has more than just the coaching experience. He was doing all the administration.
He and Otis Sadler and Mike Carter all, were involved with a lot of those, tennis programs for kids in schools and stuff way back when. And so they learned those skills to get people involved in the game, kind of Pied Piper of the sport, kind of how I view a guy like Mike Carter, and Kevin's in that same mold.
No, I appreciate all your time, Steve. Let's wind it down. Dave, why don't you ask one more, and let the big guy go.
Well, yeah, I don't really have a question. I just, it's been incredible, Steve, to catch up with you like this. Enjoyed seeing you a few months back at indoor championships, and it just seems like yesterday I was down at the HEB Tennis Center watching doubles at midnight on a Sunday. I'm at the major zone. So it's been a pleasure knowing you all these years, and you're an inspiration. Best of luck to the Aggies, and gosh, cool stuff tonight. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, thanks,
well,
Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks to Steve, many of you got the bug in this tennis and you've run with it. And because of that, so many players and parents and stuff have you've made an amazing impact on so many young players. I was telling Steve the other day, we were playing a little tournament here. Our regional was here, and Baylor was here playing. I happened to be on the court. It was a consolation match of two of our players against Baylor's guys. And one of the kids from Baylor, he kept poaching, and he kept hitting this amazing backhand volley. They ended up beating our kids, I don't know, in a tiebreaker. It was pretty close. And I finally kind of said, hey, let's try to play somewhere else against this kid, because he kept hitting winners with his backhand volley. And so I came up to him afterwards and I said, son, that you had the best backhand volley I've seen in the tournament so far. And he kind of smiled. I said, where are you from? And he said, Dallas. And then I went, you're not one of Dave Anderson's boys, are you? And he laughed. And so, yep, he was definitely one of yours. And your guys were out there at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, poaching and making great volleys like you taught them.
He told me that story. I was at Baylor. I was privileged to run a clinic at Baylor University, and had a girl from Connecticut, a young 8-year-old, and she picked out Dave's student from the Baylor team for having good strokes. When Steve was telling me that story, I asked if it was JL Diager from Diago, or how you say it, from South Africa. He spent a lot of time with Craig Tiley. I know he's got a player who plays at Baylor. But one thing to end with is I called Steve Denton up for our listeners, and I said, hey, I'm reading McEnroe's book. And I know Arthur Ashe used to call you the bull, and I thought it was big of McEnroe to put in the book that you had him by the neck and you were just about to put his head in the toilet. And they say that Steve Denton, watch out. He only gets mad like every 5 years, but get out of the way when he gets mad. But what's your recollection of grabbing Johnny Mac by the neck?
Well, I don't know about grabbed him by the neck, but I was heated. We had a doubles match at Wimbledon, as Ted Tingling said, in the only way he could say it, there was blood seeping from the gentleman's locker room at Wimbledon today. So we had our differences, but it's real interesting about the sport of tennis. You start in the locker room with your enemy, and you go on the court and you battle them. Then you come back in the locker room with the same enemy. On occasion, it boils over. And later on, we were on the same Davis Cup team with Arthur Ashe. And I think I remember Arthur saying to me, Bull, don't hurt him. We're playing Davis Cup in 2 weeks. Anyway, we made up, and, it was just heat of the moment stuff. It wasn't that I had his head in the toilet. I think I had Yvonne Lindell's head in the toilet in Philadelphia one time, but not John McEnroe.
Okay. It's all good stuff. Dave Anderson, thank you very much. Steve Denton, thank you very much. Listeners, thank you very much. Appreciate you being on the podcast a second time, Steve. It's always good to talk to you. But thanks.
Yeah, great to talk to you guys as well. Keep up the good fight.
Yeah, it is. You got to keep up the good fight. Yeah, thanks again for everything. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
Good night. Adios, amigos.